Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 78.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Carcassonne, Amazonas, Tokyo Highway, and Circle the Wagons, which we're putting on tap. We talk about what a CO2 shortage means for the British beer industry, and we reassess our bests of 2017, with our Slack channel joining us in the final round to tell us how their bests of 2017 have changed. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Reevaluate it after the hype dust has settled.
That hype dust will get into your system and it'll make your hype squeak.
Yeah, we are recording this on the 1st of July, basically halfway through the year, and we figured maybe this would be the opportunity for us to take a unhype-biased look back at the games we talked about from 2017 and some new games from 2017 that we've played as well. So we are doing a mid-year redux on the games released of last year.
Maybe a little bit of hype bias still, but certainly less than there was in January.
Yeah, and it fits in perfectly because we are two episodes, 4 weeks away from the Gen Con hype list episode. So
more hype!
Pretty much as far as possible as we can get from last year's hype and this year's hype, but it's all board games. We're all about hype. It's the cult of the new. But hey, if this is your first episode of Draft Mechanic, thank you so much for joining us. If you are a return listener, we love having you with us again as well. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on all your favorite social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. If you want to head over there, we will have a thread up for this episode and every episode. And if you want to let us know something about what we were talking about, give us your 2 cents, that is the place to do it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Board Game Geek and the Board Game Geek Guild, we now have a Board Game Geek microbadge.
Huzzah!
Thanks so much to Edward Bolmy and Mark Kale, who actually are both Charlotte area people as well. And Ed is a major microbadge creator. And Mark...
among other things.
Yes. Mark reached out to him and said, hey, this podcast that talks about board games and craft beer is looking for a microbadge. And Ed's like, you know what, I can get that done. And he did, and it is now available. If you need some Geek Gold to pick up the microbadge, you can always hop into our guild there. There's a thread and just say, hey, I need some Geek Gold, and I'll shoot some over because I have like 2,000 Geek Gold because supporting Board Game Geek gets you a lot of Geek Gold. But But I really wanted to say thanks to the people who have purchased the microbadge so far, and some of you are displaying it proudly on your avatars on Board Game Geek. So big thanks to Mark Kale, Alessandra Mongeli, Eric Buscemi, Megan Naxer, BJ from Board Game Gumbo, Patrick Hillier, Phil Hendrickson, Aaron Cassidy from Boards Alive, Bert Pike, Mark James Shriver, Mike Risley, Craig Richard, Brian Surrey, Ito from the Review Board, Lee Shelton, David Bach, and Michael Lowry. Thank so much to all of you who saw our random tweet and or Facebook post about that, and all you other listeners out there, and go and hop on the guild and grab that microbadge as well. We would so appreciate it. It's so cool to see that thing spreading out into people's avatars, and just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy out there that y'all spent some digital currency on putting our little logo on your thingy.
Now, aside from the internet, if you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we have semi-monthly meetups in person. That's twice a month. And our next one is coming up on July 5th at Good Road Cider Works. We also have a really great big board game day coming up at Good Road on Sunday, August 12th. Mm-hmm. There will be meetups between now and then, but this is the big one that we're really trying to get everybody hyped for. It's going to be right after we get back from Gen Con, so we're going to have a bunch of the newest stuff that just came out. We are going to have all kinds of cool news, but Good Road is really doing it up. They're going to have a food truck out there. We're going to be doing some raffles and some giveaways. We've got some great prizes from some of our publisher friends that have donated them so that we can give them out to you if you come out and play some fun games and drink some good ciders and meads and non-alcoholic beverages if that's your thing with us.
And some goldfish. Not drink, but eat. Probably eat some goldfish.
They're crackers. They're not goldfish.
I mean, you can blend them. Okay, good point. They're not actual goldfish. Anyway, so yes, if you're looking for information on that, draftmechanic.net has some buttons you can click, or you can just go to our Facebook page. There's information on all of that. But it is the beginning of the episode, and that means it is time to talk about upcoming games news. Danielle, Terraforming Mars has another expansion on the way. Are you surprised?
No.
Yes, Terraforming Mars Colonies, the 4th expansion, was announced before Expansion 3 even releases. And in Colonies, believe it or not, you are going to be adding colony sideboards to your game of Terraforming Mars, where you can pay some of your mega credits to establish colonies for bonuses. And there's going to be more corporations and more cards and stuff like that. Looks like that's going to be an Essen release coming out in October or so.
I'm kind of curious to see how they suggest that you mix and match all the expansions that they're coming out with. Mm-hmm. Because when we talked about Venus and when we talked about the Prelude cards that were going to give you a few more cards that you could shuffle into your deck, we talked about maybe diluting strategies. And if they're creating a whole bunch more cards that you can throw in, because I think you said this was going to be a Venus next size expansion, right?
Yeah, it looks about that size.
I'm wondering if they're going to say maybe either play with Venus or play with colonies, or maybe give a rubric of how you should set up, because I know there are other games that have huge expansions where they say, okay, maybe play with this, but don't play with this and that.
Race for the Galaxy does that. And with the Xeno invasion thing, and Evolution is...
Evolution was the one I was thinking of, where they say either play with the climate or play with flight, but don't play with climate and flight together, because it's going to cause some interactions that aren't maybe as balanced as possible.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they're going to come out with something like that for Terraforming Mars.
I feel like the Prelude... It seems like with every one of the expansions, they're adding in a new step or a new mechanic that speeds up the game as well. Like Venus Next had the World Council that pumps up a track every round, and the Prelude looks like it's going to shave off some of the beginning engine building of the game. Again, thoughts aside on that, I feel like what they're kind of doing is saying, we're going to add optional mechanics in a lot of these expansions so that you are able to customize it as you wish, so it doesn't prolong the game too much. But I think that, honestly, we luckily hit on very early on how to avoid the super dilution of the card pool by always drafting. Always draft, kids, because then you can tune your strategy better with more cards.
Yeah, something. But there comes a point where even drafting is not going to solve your dilution problem, because if you have 10 cards and you get to pick the best ones of those 10 cards, if you keep adding more stuff in, it's less likely that those 10 cards are going to be something that you wanted.
Yeah, very true. I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be at some point some kind of a splitting up into multiple decks, maybe like an early and a late game kind of deck, so that you're getting the cards you need when you need them. When you get to like 400 some cards in there, that might not be a terrible idea, but that would make a really frustrating setup. Oh man, I just thought about trying to set that up, and I'm an Among the Stars fan. I know about setting up decks of cards.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so look for that, and then the Prelude expansion is supposed to come out Gen Con-ish, so probably it will be there. I'm sure that Stephen Bonacore wants to sell a giant pile of Terraforming Mars expansions at Gen Con, so I would assume he will find a way to get it there.
Indeed.
The other exciting news, unsurprisingly, as we are approaching the Gen Con season that we've been talking about since literally January, Board Game Geek has put up their Gen Con Geek Preview webpage.
So good!
Oh, man. We talked about this last year. It was the first time that they had done one of these, and basically it is a super customizable click and set all of your ratings for what kind of things you're excited about for what is announced at the show, and as of now, there are 318 titles, including expansions, and that is games that are both demo or for sale from all a bunch different publishers. Last year, by the time Gen Con rolled around, that preview was up to 1,000 titles, and we've got 4 weeks to go. I will not be surprised if this year's outpaces that by a good bit.
One of the really excellent functionalities that I love about the Gen Con preview is that if you subscribe to the preview after you go through it once, every time they add new material, when you click through, it only shows you the new material. It filters it out. Unlike a lot of the other subscriptions that you can do on BGG, where if you click through on your subscription feed, it just takes you to that new material. This doesn't even show you the other however many games you've already rated. It just shows you the new stuff. So once you go through it, you're not looking at the same thing over and over again. It is so very functional, and I like it very much.
Yeah, huge thumbs up to Board Game Geek. The team that put this together is phenomenal and deserves 100 or 200 high fives. But we'll be talking about that obviously more 4 weeks from today on the July 30th episode, releasing on the Monday before Gen Con. It is the Hype List
It's the day before we leave.
That is the day before we leave. It is really lucky that it came out on the right week this year, and we did not have to do a random one-off episode again. No more weekly episodes ever again. Never doing that. Anyway, Let's talk about the other side of hype, perhaps Kickstarter.
It's the same side. It's just a different venue.
All right, so as we do, here are some updates from last episode. We talked about Creatures and Cupcakes from Social Sloth Games. It finished its campaign at about $6,500 out of the $3,000 goal with 303 backers. They got 2 component upgrade stretch goals on that one. Nice little family-wed game from Daryl Andrews and Adrian Matamescu, I believe it is.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic Factories from Joseph Z. Chen. This one finished out about $160,000 of the $15,000 goal. 4,387 backers, and they got 10 component upgrade stretch goals for this fun little engine-building game. I am one of them.
You are not one of the component upgrade stretch
No,
goals.
I'm one of the
you
backers.
Stay
I'm
here.
one of the backers.
You don't go to everyone.
Everybody gets a copy of me in the box.
Creepy. Finally, our last update is the Coldwater Crown The Sea expansion is currently at around $20,000 of its $7,000 goal, and it is still going strong. It is ending on July 18th. They have unlocked 1 content stretch goal, and they got some more on the horizon that they are looking to unlock in the next few weeks. So if they get more backers, they will be able to unlock a little bit more of those content stretch goals that they have going on. I'm really excited to see where this ends up because Coldwater Crown is a great game. The Sea is a fun expansion. We talked about it last episode if you're interested and want to hear our thoughts having played a preview copy of it.
Yes, so if you're a fan of Coldwater Crown, please go check that out. There will be another
Or a
update.
fan of the sea.
If you're a fan of the ocean as well, or the sea. But yeah, there will probably have another update on this one next episode because it will still be running as of next episode on the 16th.
That's how these project updates work.
All right, so new projects. I am going to dive onto the deep end a little bit. I have a game called So Long My World. This is coming to us from Axis Mundi Games. This ends on Tuesday, July 10th. It's currently sitting at $59,000 of the $10,000 goal with 1,127 backers. You can back this game for $35 for the base box or $57 for the base and the expansion and a cool little miniature because you gotta have a miniature on Kickstarter.
Obviously.
They are estimating delivery of this March of next year. This is an action selection and resource gathering and hand management kind of game that takes place at the end of human existence. I'm kind of burying the lead on this one because I feel like thematically and presentation-wise, this game is way more than the actual game itself. This is a game that I got put on my radar because it popped up on Instagram, and the artwork for this is very stunning. It's very much black background, white outline kind of style, like invert, negative everything. But anyway, this game plays 2 to 5 players. Also, there is going to be a solo campaign that takes place with a branching story that promises apparently 20 hours of content.
So this game plays 1 to 5 players.
Yeah, it plays 1 to 5 players, but the 1-player game is much different than the 2 to 5 is what I'm trying to get across.
Cool.
The solo campaign is going to dive deep into the story in the game to gain an understanding of what has caused the end of humanity. So, okay, I've looked at the Kickstarter page for a while, and the game is not really too complex, it seems. You have some cards, and you are going to basically, everybody's going to do a selection at the same time of which of the 6 different region cards they want to go to on a particular turn, and then you're going to have a simultaneous reveal. You're going to have a little bit of kind of manipulation of each other's pawns and stuff as you're moving around, and then your total goal is to go to whatever location, gather some tokens that are the feelings tokens, which I find kind of a funny phrase. Have to go collect feelings tokens to then spend those tokens to play cards out of your hands that kind of allow you to build a little bit of an engine and gain points and stuff like that. I am looking at this game specifically because of the theme and the style of this game, more than the mechanics. The mechanics looks like it's going to be kind of fun, but something about the style and the setting and the look and the feel of this game is a lot different than what we see in modern board gaming. And what really caught my eye was the solo campaign, because they wanted to, or they claim that they're going to have this game kind of make you feel some stuff and really kind of get deep into the feeling of what it is like to exist at the end of human existence. Not like a virus or something going to collide with the Earth or whatever, but it's just like humanity ends in 6 hours, period. What do you do with those 6 hours? And as somebody who's played a lot of kind of walking simulator games over the last year or so on computers, like What Remains of Edith Finch, Gone Home, stuff like that, I'm really interested to see what board games can do in this space. We talked, I guess, a few episodes ago in one of our final rounds about our friend and game designer local Nate Bivens here, who is working on kind of bringing walking simulators to board games as well to see how it feels. And I really am interested to see if this game can make me feel things more than just the mechanics of a game making me feel clever.
Yeah, it's not often that you get a board game that the theme is do emotional work. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then We Held Hands tried to do that, but it was more do emotional reading than
Yeah.
or at least mind reading than it was do actual emotional work. And this is actually trying to simulate doing emotional work. I'm not sure how I feel about the humanity is ending, this is the end of it. Like, I don't particularly want to experience that scenario,
Yeah.
and very frequently hope that I don't.
Yes, very, very true.
But, I mean, it certainly is different, and I agree with you, the art is very striking. You either will like it or you won't, I have a feeling.
Yeah, it's very true.
But this is different than a lot of the stuff that we've seen, and I can't think of anything that comes close to it.
Yeah, but if that sounds interesting to you out there, I highly encourage you to go check out the Kickstarter page for this. Brian Everett from Cloak and Meeple, part of Punchboard Media, got a preview copy and did a preview video for this where he does some gameplay, talks about his thoughts, and there's a few others on there as well. But I'm interested to see what this game turns out to be, and I'm hoping that it means we're trying some new things in board gaming. So that's my thought on So Long My World. I am looking at that, and if it sounds even remotely interesting to you, go check it out, I guess.
Now on the completely other end of the spectrum, I have an adorable game that's coming from Kids Table Games that I wanted to talk about. This is Wreck Raiders, and it ends on July 19th, so the campaign is still going for another couple of weeks, actually, after this drops. It is currently at $16,000 of its $7,600 goal, so they are well-funded, with 579 backers. You can back this for $30 US, with an estimated delivery of April of next year. This is a family game featuring dice drafting and worker placement. It's got set collection and really, really adorable fishes. You are going to be rolling dice into the lid of the box and then placing your worker out onto one of the spaces that matches the number that you rolled. And the spaces are divided up into different regions, and when you place your worker on a space that matches what you rolled, you are going to give the benefit not only to yourself, but to the workers that are adjacent to you in that area, whether they are friendly or not. So it is to your benefit to place next to yourself, but if you really want to take a specific reward, you may have to place your meeples so that you give other players that benefit as well. You're going to be using the treasure that I'm sorry, I didn't mention this, but you are wreck raiders, you are raiding pirate ship wrecks, and you're going to be using the treasure that you find on these wrecks to create museum exhibits and also to put into your personal vault so that you can get points towards the end of the game, because money is points in this game. You're also going to be building your own very cool aquarium with some of the stuff that you find in the ocean that is not necessarily treasure, and you will get points for how cool your aquarium is at the end of the game. Kids Table has done a bunch of family weight games, and it looks like from the reviews that have been posted on this Kickstarter page, this is maybe a little bit more in-depth than some of the games that they've created before. This is a little bit aimed towards gamer families, it sounded like, which I'm excited for because Kids Table was really not our focus on their previous games. We've played some of them and they were fun, but if this has a little bit more game to it, I'm really excited to see what it's going to be about. Also, it's got amazing artwork because the Capels are very good at their artwork and everything is very bright and just nicely drawn. It is the opposite feeling that I get from when I look at the artwork of So Long My World. So
Yes.
if you're looking for something like nice and happy and where nobody dies in 6 hours, as far as I can tell, maybe look at Wreck Raiders.
I agree with that. They put out some good stuff, and this is definitely something worth keeping your eye on as well. Well, more information on those, obviously, on Kickstarter, and we'll have links up in the show notes like we do. But it's time to take a break and talk about games we have actually played. Let's
do it.
Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. Alrighty, in case you doubted our commitment to the bit, we are talking about another Carcassonne game today. In fact, we have Carcassonne Amazonas, the 2016 release from Z-Man Games. Plays 2 to 5 players in about 35 minutes. Designed by Klaus Jürgenwerder, with art by Vicky Dalton. This one is on really a tile-laying and area control game? Oh, this says Capybara, though, so that makes it different, right?
Yeah, there have not been any Capybara in the previous Carcassonne games we've talked about.
Yes. Danielle, would you like to give us a rundown on how to play this particular game of Carcassonne?
Yes, but first I will tell you, as I always do, how you play regular Carcassonne, and then we'll work from there. On your turn in Carcassonne, you draw a tile, you look at it, it will have some features on it. You're going to look at the board that's already been laid out in front of you, and you're going to match the features on your tile to the features that are already on the board. You may then place one of your meeples onto that feature, and if you complete a feature, you get points for it, and you get your meeple back. If you don't complete a feature, your meeple stays there until that feature is complete, and then you get points for it and you get your meeple back. You're going to keep going until there are no more tiles, and whoever has the most points wins.
Woo!
That is how you Carcassonne.
Big fan of points here.
Now, in Carcassonne Amazonas, there are a couple of different things. Usually in Carcassonne, you only start with one starting tile out in the center of the board. In Amazonas, you're going to start with a large Amazon start board. That's maybe 8 tiles large, 2x4. And it is going to have the start of the Amazon River. You are going to place a boat meeple on it because this is also a little bit of a race game.
Boat.
Indeed.
Big fan of boat games.
After that has been set up, you are going to take your meeples, which consist of 4 meeples and 2 hut meeples that look kind of like a Madonna bra when you put them next to each other. Mm-hmm. You are then going to draw a tile as normal, and you are going to look at it. It will either have some forest, or some river, or some city. Actually, it will have a combination of those things. Like in regular Carcassonne, you are going to be matching up the sides of the tile so that features are consistent, so the river doesn't just stop when it comes to a new tile. But there are a couple of things on these tiles that you are not going to be familiar with if you've played other Carcassonnes. There are boat icons, which when you connect them to a meeple, whether it be an existing meeple or you place the meeple when you place that boat icon tile, you are going to advance your boat that you placed at the beginning of the game. This is important because when you reach a certain scoring point, which I'll get to in a minute, the person who is farthest ahead on the Amazon River is going to get the first place scoring points, and the person who is in second place is going to get the second place scoring points. If you're playing with more than 2 people, anybody who's behind that gets no points. The next type of icon that is new to Amazonas are animals, and there are lots of different types of animals, including the capybara we talked about earlier, and they are going to be scored at the end of the game. You are going to place a hut out on a jungle section, sort of like the farmers in base Carcassonne where you lay them down in the field and they stay there till the end of the game to score. The huts are going to be placed out on a section of jungle, and at the end of the game you will get a point for every animal that is in jungle connected to the hut that you have. Now, if there are multiple people who end up having huts in the same jungle because they're connected afterwards, it's going to be the person with the most huts, but in the case that you are the only one in your jungle, which is actually fairly likely, you are just going to score a point per animal in your jungle section. Other than that, it's really fairly similar to regular Carcassonne with the exception of the river. There are several tiles that have a piece of the Amazon River, and they're very obvious. They've got a nice wide section of river, and when you draw one of those, you must place it on the end of the river. There will only be one open end of the river, and you must place it there. Almost all of these have a number of crocodiles or piranha on them. These are the scoring tiles that I mentioned earlier that are going to trigger the first and second place scoring based on where you are on the river. The person who is in the lead will get the total number of crocodiles and piranha in points. The person who is in second place will get only the piranha. So you are trying to stay ahead so that you get these scoring points repeatedly because there are a good number of river tiles in the game. Some of these tiles also have a exclamation mark made out of rock instead of the crocodiles and piranhas, and this is going to allow you to place a double wide river tile, which just has a higher scoring total. Once you have placed all the tiles, that includes all of the river tiles and all of the jungle tiles that you're going to be placing around, you are going to score up any non-completed features. The rivers will score as they did during the game, and your villages will score at a halved rate, just like in any Carcassonne, really. And then whoever is farthest ahead on the river is going to get some additional points, and whoever has the most points at the end of the game, say it with me,
wins
the game.
Wins the game. Wins the game.
That is Carcassonne Amazonas.
Ah, the game. Yeah, we've been playing a lot of these Carcassonne spinoffs, and I'll just say up front, this is my least favorite so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I like this more or less than Discovery, but I'm not eager to play it again.
Yeah, I think there's a few really interesting things about this one. Like you said, we've got the Amazon River that constricts your play area. You're kind of guaranteed that your play area is going to be long and narrow because you're always going to be building off the banks of the river.
I'd like to stop you right there a second. That is one of my problems with this game. You need to have a fairly long table. This is longer than you would be able to fit on one of the standard, 3 foot by 3 foot not cafe tables, but like restaurant tables that you would be able to play games on. You need really a longer table. This took up more than half of the big tables we play with at Salud Cerveceria, which are just enormous tables. It took up more than half of our dining table. So you need to really have the space for this game.
Yeah. The rulebook does suggest you do at least 4 feet of length for this game, which is surprising. And I think, that's the surprising thing about it. And this, in a way, it makes it feel different than the other Carcassonnes for that particular reason. I always feel like in Carcassonne, we always get a big square or a big circular city, but this one is obviously a very big line. I also I don't know if I like it or not, but I'm interested by the fact that you cannot build further than the mouth of the river at any given time. Whatever the last river tile placed out is the furthest in that particular direction you're allowed to place other tiles, which kind of, constricts the way that you're building out your tile world as well.
Yeah, but there's no limit on how wide you can make it, so I never really felt terribly restricted, because if there was something that I couldn't place at the mouth of the river, I could at least throw it on another river, because each of those scoring tiles that gets placed on the river has a little tributary offshoot. So there are plenty of river sections being started off the main river.
Yeah, the river itself, though, is really just the whole core of this game. We talk about the river and the racing of the boats and stuff down there, and it really felt like, unlike other Carcassonne variants we've tried so far, this one made it that you had to constantly be paying attention to the river, and you'll either be hunting down those boat icons and putting your people on the river or the smaller tributaries to get those boat spaces, or just choosing to not place specifically so that you get to take a boat move for free.
Yeah, I didn't say that in the overview, but if you don't place a meeple, instead of placing the meeple, you get to move your boat meeple up one, which does make you really wary to use the meeples that you do have. And you are starting with that restricted meeple pool that we've talked about in the previous Carcassonne expansion. So, you've only got 4 base meeples and the 2 huts. But here you're even less likely to place them out, not just because you have so few of them, but because you really need to stay up on that race. Otherwise, you are just going to get just schooled on points. Because if you figure the river has at least 3 points per scoring opportunity. I don't think there is anything that has less than either 2 crocodile and 1 piranha, or 1 crocodile and 2 piranha.
Yeah.
Over the course of maybe 10 scoring opportunities, if you are perpetually in second, or even farther back than second, if you're getting none of those points, that's a tremendous amount of scoring that you'd have to do on cities and rivers and animals in your jungle to have to make that up above and beyond what the person who is in the lead is doing.
Yeah, I will say, though, at the same time, this 2-player game we played earlier today, I got really far ahead on the river track in terms of points for a while, and then I realized that I was so far ahead at a point, I'm not humble bragging here, but I was so far ahead on points that I didn't need to really care so much about the river, and I think that if we did play more games, I would find that there was more opportunities for me to get big points in the villages and in the rivers and stuff when you have areas that have the fruit basket icons in them. I don't know if we talked about that in the talk over either, but a lot of village areas will have these fruit basket icons in them, and they are worth 1 extra point. So
rivers as well.
Yeah, I had 1 or 2 city or villages areas that scored me 10 points, and I got another 4 points off of them from fruit baskets. And I guess over a long enough game, if you get enough of those fruit baskets, it can kind of make up for not being in the lead on that river. Maybe? I don't know.
I don't think so. The other thing that is really important about that river scoring is that when you place the river tile, you have the opportunity to not place a meeple because it counts as a tile. And if you don't place a meeple when you place that scoring tile, the person who places it essentially gets to jump ahead. So if you're tied, they're going to break the tie and come in first place. So if you really want to be ensured that you're going to be scoring the river, you need to be the first place person, because if that person in second is tied with you, you can just be automatically jumped ahead of if they decide not to place a meeple. I will also point out, I did at some point get ahead of you on the river in that game. We just didn't draw any scoring tiles during that time. So if you had completely neglected the river, I would have just kept going and been ahead of you.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And this is another thing that really comes down to the luck of the draw, is that I drew probably 70-75% of the river tiles in this particular game, the 2-player game that we played earlier today. So that really kind of lopsided it in that I was able to always move 1 ahead when I was placing a river tile because there was nothing else I wanted to do on that river tile, which got me a bunch of points.
There's also always the possibility there are a couple of river tiles that have 2 boat icons, and if you are able to connect to something that has 2 boat icons, or connect that tile to 2 rivers that you have, and then not place a meeple because you already have existing meeples, you can move 3 boat tiles in a single placement. So if somebody else is counting on being maybe 1 or 2 spaces behind and that being close enough for second, they could suddenly find themselves entirely out of the running. And in a 2-player game, if you're not 1 space behind the leader, you don't get the second place points, which now we're not talking about a difference of maybe one person getting 3 and one person getting 2. you're talking about a 3-point spread that's automatically happening when that scoring happens, and it can really make or break a game.
Yeah, and when we had a 5-player game as well, we played 5 players, really the other total swing side of this thing. The river just became this thing where 1 or 2 people got ahead, and the tiles didn't come up frequently enough for anybody else to catch up really on that as well. It is kind of funny, at the end of that, we had, I think, 1 person in first, 2 people tied for second, and the other 2 people tied for third. Everybody just kind of, sectioned out just depending on where the tiles came up. One thing I also kind of wanted to talk about with this is the way that the jungles kind of function. And I've been thinking about this more and more as we've been playing these spin-off Carcassonnes where you get the 4 meeples and the 2 of the other meeple. It's kind of a artificial limiting of how many farmers or farmer-style endgame scoring things you can do. And we talked about this. I think we've actually talked about this over in Hill and Dale, how you start with 6 meeples in classic Carcassonne. And then in each of these, you have 4 and 2, 4 and 2. So you're fixed into only having 2 endgame scoring meeples in particular, which I guess, is probably the thing that you're most frustrated about when we talk about farmers in base Carcassonne, is that I really am able to play long endgame points and get like 3 or maybe even 4 farmers out there that get a whole crap ton of points or something.
Well, I'm more frustrated by your ability to snipe fields that I'm already in, and I tend to overcommit farmers to try and prevent you from doing that, which means that I have fewer meeples because you do have that interchangeability between meeples that you can use standing up or meeples that you can use lying down. In these spin-offs, they do distinguish them so that you only ever are going to have 2 huts, and I'm less likely to throw both of those huts into the same area of jungle unless it's a really fruitful area of jungle.
Right.
That I really want to make sure that you don't find a way to place into. But really, I've not seen jungle sniping being a problem as long as the tiles are placed correctly, which is an important caveat on one of our games. But I'm less likely to try and overcommit because I can't, because there's only those 2 pieces that I'm able to use.
That makes sense. The thing that I wanted to kind of point at with the jungle scoring in this game particularly is part of the fun of using farmers in base Carcassonne is that you get to kind of play the long game and say, I want to continue to slowly build around this particular field. In Amazonas, the way that the board builds out in that kind of long, narrow thing, where honestly there are periods where you will only have Amazon tiles for a few spaces and nothing on either side of it. This game kind of limits how big your jungle areas can get in a way, because you're going to continually be bisected by that Amazon River in the center, and the Amazon constantly has either village areas or tributaries coming off the side of it as well, which I guess could be good, because then you don't get a 40-point jungle with 40 different animals in it. But for the most part, I felt like I didn't even, like I would only use my hut I'd use my second hut near the end of the game just because, well, I got to use this thing eventually. I wasn't encouraged to use those huts as much as I felt I was in prior games. Like even in Over Hill and Dale, with the barns or whatever it is that you have, that's a 9-square area, so you know exactly what you're going to get out of it. This one, I don't feel compelled to use that second hut too often, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying there, but that's kind of where I'm feeling it.
Well, I mean, you need to use that second hut because the huts are going to give you really very large chunks of your points. We talked about the river giving you big points if you are in the lead, but I mean, I think the game we played, we both had 16-point jungles.
Yeah, you had a 15 and I think you both were 15s or something like that. And I had a 15 and a 4, just because I just didn't use that second hut.
So you're going to get a lot of points from those huts, but it's less interactive. In Carcassonne base game, when you lay those farmers down, they're going to get points for every completed city that they're touching with their field. And everybody is building cities. Everybody wants to make sure that they get those points from cities. So there's an incentive to create cities that could possibly end up being points for somebody else. With the huts, you weren't going to come over into my section of jungle because you didn't have any meeples over there. And if you were adding to river tiles, I was already on the rivers in that section of jungle, so you probably weren't going to place a tile because you'd be giving me points for the river, and then you'd be giving me points for the hut because I had already placed it there. Whereas you had sections of hut that I couldn't even see in the last game we were playing. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to go over there because I'm not going to place anything over there because it's not helping me. This game felt a lot more like you were building your own thing, and there was really not a lot of interaction. I also am just not crazy about that long-term endgame scoring. I've talked about this in a lot of these different variants that we've played of the Carcassonne. I would like to be able to score the points and not worry about it. This, at the same time, was a little bit like that because there just wasn't that interaction. But I don't think it was in the same way that Over Hill and Dale solved the problem of endgame scoring, where it gave you a little area that you paid attention to for a while, but once it was done, it was done. Mm-hmm. But you still were committed to that zone. Here, nothing's ever really done, but you're also not really taking somebody else's points or interacting with their huts in any real meaningful way. Even in a 5-player game, I don't think we terribly had much interaction with the huts.
I think my real frustration with the huts is kind of like you dislike it for the opposite reason I do. You didn't want that kind of stuff to be there, and I'm kind of wish that they had just done a better job with it, honestly. We've got the river, this race that's this huge focus, and we've got these huts, and you're limited in how you can use them, and then the two things interact in a way that make it even more limited in the way that you can place your huts because of the way that the board builds out. Like, I think that the river is a really cool mechanism in terms of controlling the flow of the way that it builds out. Unfortunately, then they added mechanics onto that made it less fun. Like, if I could have had Over Hill and Dale with a really long river, that might have been interesting because then you're kind of incentivized in where you're building those 9-block areas and so on and so forth. And at the same time, I don't need this race in Carcassonne because I feel like it just encouraged me to not place meeples, which made it less fun to play the game.
Yeah, and it certainly reduced your options. When you got to the point where your meeples were only, maybe you had 2 meeples on a river and 1 meeple that was on a village somewhere. That leaves you only 1 meeple to place on a feature. When you draw a tile, you are so much more likely to just not place another meeple and move your boat along because A, the boat is very important, and B, you want to have that last meeple in case you get something that's absolutely too good to pass up.
Yeah.
It felt like you didn't want to play the game because you were incentivized to not place those out.
Yeah, and that's not really fun for a Carcassonne because the best part of playing Carcassonne is putting a meeple down, really, and then having that meeple come back with a whole bunch of points. So I don't know, Amazon is a curious thing. I guess I can't remember if this one or Over Hill and Dale is the most recent. I think Over Hill and Dale was 2015, and this one came out in 16, something like that. But I feel like this was kind of the, oh man, well, we've got a series of these spin-offs going, we better do another one. Let's make a really big river, because River was a cool expansion that everybody liked for the original one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that they tried to add something new to it, which is this sort of race.
Yeah.
I just don't want it. If you're gonna play this game, I'd say just buy regular Carcassonne. It has a better, more fun implementation of the things that are good about this. It is lacking capybaras, though.
All right, so we have 4 spinoffs so far. We have the City, we have the Discovery, we have Over Hill and Dale, and we have Amazonas. What's your ranking?
I'm definitely gonna go with Over Hill and Dale first.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like City next, and then Discovery, and then this one.
Okay. I'm going City, and I think I'm starting to want to play Discovery second, and then Over Hill and Dale, and then this one fourth. All right, well, that is the tentative current ranking of Carcassonne spin-off games. And oh yes, this is going to continue because we do have more that we have been sourcing. If you are out there and you have a copy of Hunters and Gatherers you want to trade, please contact me on BGG. You can look at the trade list. I know that this one is going to be the hardest one to find, but it is obviously going to have to come down the line eventually.
But we've got more already downstairs, so don't worry about
very true.
us not getting that and you not having any more episodely Carcassonne.
Yes.
Because that's at least 2 more episodes away.
Please tell me we can call this the Carcassonne. No? No? We're not doing that?
You can do it if you'd like.
All right.
I didn't say you couldn't.
Now leaving the Carcassonne. Danielle, what is our next game we're talking about?
Our next game is Tokyo Highway, which is a 2016 release from Itten. It plays exactly 2 players in 30 to 50 minutes, which actually seems a little bit long. Mm-hmm. And the designers are Naotaka Shimamoto and Yoshiaki Tomioka. The artist is also Yoshiaki Tomioka, and this is a game of dexterity, route building, and placing tiny cars with tweezers.
So Tokyo Highway is one of these games that kind of makes the rounds on Board Game Instagram as this odd Japanese dexterity game that is very hard to get your hands of. It's very hard to get your hands on a copy of here in the United States, but every now and then they will pop up. They were on the Board Game Geek store, and then this particular batch went up on MeepleSource, and I got an email standing in line at Dunkin' Donuts, and during the line at Dunkin' Donuts while I was waiting for the coffee, I may have ordered a copy of Tokyo Highway, and now we have it.
By the time you were out of the line, it was probably sold out.
Yes, very true. I think they had like 20 copies or something. But anyway, this is a odd little dexterity game that comes in a small gray box that basically you open it up and it looks like you've bought a box of popsicles. popsicle sticks.
Because you've bought a box of popsicle sticks.
Technically, you've bought a box of popsicle sticks, but you also get 66 wooden cylinders that are about 1 centimeter tall and maybe 1 inch in diameter.
Ooh.
Yes, but most of them are gray and 6 of them are yellow, and you're going to split all of these objects up evenly. One person will get 10 tiny blue cars, one person will get 10 tiny pink cars, and each player will get a pair of tweezers. Once you realize that that's 2 pairs of tweezers and not just one really weird pair of tweezers. Maybe I didn't realize that they separated when they came in the box, and I just thought it was like a really big pair of... Okay, anyway, moving on. So, in a game of Tokyo Highway, you are going to be basically building roads through each other's roads. Your goal is to kind of use your cylinders and popsicle sticks to make one continuous road that will go either over or under your opponent's road. If you are able to place a segment that goes all the way over every lane or every popsicle stick of the other player's road, and you're the very top, you get to put a car on it, which is good. And also, if you go below all of your opponent's roads, then you can also place a car on that particular popsicle stick, which is good because you have to be the first person to get all 10 of your cars onto the roadways in order to win the game. The mechanics get a little bit trickier when I tell you the way that you are allowed to place your particular popsicle stick roads. You're going to start with a road that goes from the table up to a cylinder 1 high, and then from there you have to place a cylinder that is +1 or -1 in height. Obviously the first one you can only go up to a 2. You have to place a +1 or -1 onto your current road, and you can only have one popsicle stick road coming off of that cylinder, so you're going to be making one continuous road. And that's going to hold true for the whole game, except for those 3 yellow cylinders that you have. The yellow cylinders are junctions, and they allow you to do some interesting things. For example, you can maintain the same height, or you can go up or down more than 1 space in height. So you could go from a 1 to a 3 if you're building a tower of 3 and put a yellow at the top of it. You can't place a yellow directly on the ground, so you can't like go from a 3 to a 1, which is good because I think that that is also too far of a decrease for you to be able to drive a car.
You need to have like those little off-ramp things that they have, the truck ramps.
Yes, and also the yellow ones allow you to make a junction basically and put a third popsicle stick road out of that. So you're never going to connect with the other player's roads, but you're going to very quickly make this kind of spaghetti bowl of roads that looks like a crazy interchange junction. And obviously, being a dexterity game, you have to place things without knocking things over. If you knock over your opponent's stuff, every piece that you knock off of their stuff, you have to give up one of your cylinders to them. That's really important because if you ever can't place a cylinder on your turn, you've lost. That's the you either win by placing all your cars or lose by not being able to place a cylinder. So you will continue on until one of those things is met, and then that person will be the winner of Tokyo Highway.
This game is, let me start off by saying, not for people who are not good at spatial reasoning. If you're one of those people who can't visualize an ice cube, then you're not going to be real great at this game because you have to be able to plan where you're going to place your road next when you're placing the current piece. If you just place things willy-nilly, you're A, never going to be able to place any of your cars, and B, you're very quickly going to end up in a spot where you can't physically make your popsicle sticks fit into the spaghetti bowl that is this highway system. So if you are not a spatial person, just give this one a pass.
If you do really like spatial reasoning, though, and spatial placement and kind of thinking out in your head, this one is a really fun puzzle. At least it was for me. I really enjoy spatial reasoning, and this is a spatial reasoning puzzle that allowed me to go in 3 dimensions. And not just in 3 dimensions, but a non-grid-based 3-dimensional spatial reasoning game. I mean, this is definitely a thinker in terms of dexterity. You really, really, really have to think about what will the rotational arc of this particular point get me for my next road. Will that be able to get in a way that is going to give me a good ending point but also cross over the opponent's road? And it is the kind of thing that you get halfway through this game and you've got this really wacky jungle of popsicle sticks and you're just looking at it and just like, well, I guess I'm putting a stick directly in the middle of all of that, and you're just kind of like sliding it along and trying to slide a little cylinder into the middle of this mess. And I'll put some pictures up on the show notes page, obviously, but it is something you need to really see and play with to get a feel for how it's going to work for you.
And it feels so good when you are able to place 2 cars on the same popsicle stick, because you are able to place a car for every one of your opponent's roads that you place a road as a topmost level or underneath. So if one popsicle stick is able to cross over the top of 2 different sections of your opponent's road, you've placed a fifth of the cars that you need to place in the game. And that feels really like a win because you did something really good with your planning in order to be able to do that. You didn't just accidentally do so, at least not in the games that we've played. Nobody ever just accidentally made sure that they could place 2 cards in a turn.
Yeah, so this game is also obviously limited to 2 players, and if you have 2 players that are way different in their dexterity skill sets, it's not going to be a fun time. I know that, somebody could easily trounce somebody else if they had a really steady hand and the other person was really shaky or just didn't really understand how long a popsicle stick would turn out to be, which is a weird sentence, but I think you know what I mean. But I also, I'm kind of bummed that it's only 2 players, and allegedly there's an expansion out there in the world that can get 3 and 4 players and add in some buildings as obstacles. But I also think with 3 or 4 players, this would probably become a drag because it would take so long for your turn to come back around. Unless you were playing with a bunch of people that are very skilled in this particular game and really understood the way the pieces work together.
I mean, realistically, you could play 4 players and just play in teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
If you had the red team or the pink team and the blue team, then, you place 1 popsicle stick, then on the next turn for your team, your partner places 1 popsicle stick, and then you're able to go every 4th turn, but only really play as 2 teams. There would still be a little bit of downtime, but you would be working with your partner to do what we were talking about earlier, to plan where you're placing that route, but they would then have the difficulty of actually getting the popsicle stick in there and placing the car if you get to place a car.
Yeah.
I think that might actually work if you really wanted it to work with 4 players.
Yeah, and I guess you could also then have it really kind of be, you can team up 2 people that have different levels of skill as well. That allows one person to be a really good planner and one person a really good placer. That might be a good way to get some people into this game that wouldn't otherwise play it. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I've told you pretty much everything about Tokyo Highway that there is to tell. There's no deeper strategy to it than can you place a popsicle stick gently between other popsicle sticks and know where you're going to end up. If that sounds interesting to you, I come to a Draft Mechanic game night because I'm going to keep it in the game bag because it's a perfect thing to have at game night.
I mean, I think the suggestion is if that sounds interesting to you, keep an eye out. This one is going to be one that you're going to want to pick up.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think this is a really fun and different type of dexterity game than we're used to seeing with at least planning and spatial reasoning games. It is neat to see on the table. It is definitely eye-catching, and it's going to draw people in. You're not going to want them to touch the table, but they're going to gather around the table. This is a fun thing, and when it's done, you immediately want to do it again to see what other crazy highway system you can build.
Yeah. I will say, the one thing that keeps me from giving it the super glowing recommendation is that the limited availability of it, plus the kind of high cost, if you are able to find a copy that is getting imported, I ain't gonna lie, it's like $50 to get a copy of Tokyo Highway.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't a game that is squarely in your wheelhouse, which it is exactly in my wheelhouse, this is probably not the kind of thing you want to be ravenously looking for.
I'm suddenly suggesting that you buy your own popsicle sticks and use some resource cubes from another game to purchase or to play Tokyo Highway.
Yep. But I found it a lot of fun, and again, if you are going to come to a Draft Mechanic game night, I will have it on me, and I will gladly play a game of Tokyo Highway with you. I think we should move on to the next game, so let's talk about Circle the Wagons, a 2017 release from Button Shy Games, plays 2 players in about 15 minutes. This is designed by Stephen Aramini, Danny Devine, and Paul Kluka, with art by Brian Fisher and Beth Sobel, and this is a game of card drafting, tile placement, and making sure you leave your gun between 2 deserts.
Like you do.
Yes. Also, I feel like we should mention up front that kind of the style that Button Shy does their games in, all of their games are these small wallet games that are made up of 18 cards in a small little plastic billfold, so you can basically throw them in your wallet. They're designed for super quick portability, and they're pretty cheap and easy to produce, and they do actually a monthly game release now. They're doing a monthly one of these wallet games. The last one was Super Tall that just finished on Kickstarter. Sprawlopolis was the one for May, and I know that there's another one coming up soon in June, or in July, so keep an eye out for Button Shy because they're putting out a lot of these cool little games. But Danielle, you want to talk about how this one is played?
Sure. In Circle the Wagons, you're going to take your deck of cards, which are double-sided, and you're going to give them a shuffle. One side of all of the cards has an objective. The other side is divided into quarters, and it has 4 zones that have both a background terrain and an icon on them. There's going to be a whole different mix of the backgrounds and icons. None is specifically matched with a background and an icon together all the time, so you're going to have a big mix of these. You are then going to take 3 of the cards, flip them up in the center with the objective side up, and then take the rest of the cards and make a circle around these center objective cards. you're going to decide who goes first, and the other player is going to pick a card for that person to start with. On your turn, you are going to decide to either take the card that you are situated on, so the one that was designated as the first card at the beginning of the game, or the one that you're on, going from there, and you can either take it and place it into your region that you are building, or you can skip it and move on to a card past that and give any card that you skip to the other player and they'll put it into their region. What you're trying to do is work towards the objectives that are face up in the middle of the circle. Every game is going to be different because every card has a different objective on the back, but there will be 3 objectives for every game. And they may say something like have a gun icon between 2 desert icons in the example that you talked about in our little description before. Or it may say you'll get 6 points for every fort that has a cow next to it. Or at the end of the game, add up all your cow icons and all your field tiles, divide them by 2, and you'll get that many points. There's a wide variety of ways to compute how many points you'll get at the end of the game for each objective, but they will change every game because it depends on which cards are in the middle. So like I said, on your turn, you have the option to take the card that you're on or to skip over it, giving any cards you skip to the other player, and any cards that are taken are going to be placed adjacent to other cards that you've already placed in your portion of land. Obviously, the first card isn't going to be touching anything, but you can place them right side up or upside down as long as they remain long ways, the standard way that you'd place a playing card. And you are trying to create regions of the same type of terrain, as well as fulfilling the objectives in the middle of the circle. At the end of the game, you are going to get points for every postage stamp, is what I call them, postage stamp in the largest region you have of each of the 6 types of terrain. And then you're going to get the points which are dictated by the objectives in the middle of the circle. The game is over once you've gotten all the way around the circle, because when you skip a card, it is taken out of the circle, and when you take a card, it's taken out of the circle. You only play till you run out of cards. Then you're going to compute everybody's score, and the person with the most points wins.
I don't believe you.
Okay, then don't.
Oh.
You won't win very often.
Well, that was true of my games. Circle the Wagons. I see what I've done wrong. No,
You wanted points.
This is a very quick and fun game. I enjoy every minute of the game, and then I can choose to play it again if I want, honestly. And I think we did just play like 2-3 games back to back on this.
You did, and when I played it with Daniel, we did the same thing. We played 2 games right in a row because it was just, okay, we played it once. We're already into the groove of it. Let's just go again.
Yeah, it's very satisfying, and it gives you the feel of tile laying with different scoring conditions every time, and the way that the scoring conditions come out obviously impact the cards that are available in the game. So maybe the one that has, 3 cows on it is suddenly face down, and you're like, oh, well, I forgot that card's not around. So it's not like you're going to memorize all of the cards all of the time and be able to plan based off of that. There's a lot of variability that comes out of a game this small, and I was really, really impressed by that.
The other interesting thing about the variability is that there are some objectives that just work better together. There was a game that I played with Daniel where cows were valuable on 2 of the different objectives.
Okay.
So that made cows really valuable in that game. But you also want to make sure that you are making large regions of each of the different types of terrain. And if you only go for cows, at the end of the game, you're going to be behind since you're always scoring the largest postage stamp count of every terrain region. If you're only going for the icons or those objectives in the middle, you very well still may lose the game, even if you blow the other person out of the water with those objectives, because you also want to make sure that you're being attentive to your regions. So there's a couple of different ways to get a whole bunch of points in this game, and you really need to make sure you're measuring whether it's worth it to give that other person a card when you want to skip ahead to something that looks like it might be valuable, but you might be giving them a whole bunch of endgame points for those regions.
Another thing I really found interesting about the way that the game plays, and this is another advantage of it being limited 15 cards that you're playing with in each game, is you have the ability to overlap cards in this. You can overlap a side or a corner or something like that. But unlike a game like Honshu, which has a very similar thing where you're getting cards, you're building them into your personal tableau, and you can overlap things, and they're 6 to a card instead of 4. With only 15 cards in the game, that means you're probably going to have between 6 and 9 cards in your particular zone, which also then means if you overlap a single space, that's a big difference in terms of what you have available to you for those endgame scorings. Removing one small postage square is going to remove a good bit on whatever that particular scoring thing is. And I really enjoyed that because it made me really think more about my placement of cards and really kind of weigh if I needed to overlap this card or if I could just place this card adjacent to something else and not lose out on this particular thing, especially when I'm going for I need as many things in a straight run of forts as I possibly can. Is it worth it for me to cover up that particular gun just so I can get another fort in this particular line? And, every now and then, maybe it is. It's an interesting puzzle to play with, especially for, enjoying kind of a tile-laying game like that.
And who doesn't love 18 cards in a slim leatherette wallet?
Ooh, so chic. All right, well, that is Circle the Wagons. I enjoyed it. Danielle, you?
I very much enjoyed it, and I'm going to be throwing it into my purse if we're going out to play maybe games at a brewery, or we're going out to just have it in my purse. I mean, I had been keeping one of the Paco games in my purse, and it was getting pretty beat up in there for a while. So maybe it is time to change to the little plastic wallet, and then we will have a new fun game to play anywhere.
Good job, Button Shy. Well, we enjoyed that game so much that we've decided to put it on tap, and we're going to do that after this break. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. So we decided to move our on-tap feature and actually the beer segment up a little bit in the episode. Obviously, the on-tap works perfect right after the recent plays today, and our feature makes more sense with the final round. So we're just going to, play a little loose with that one and swap a few items up. So let's get right into our on-tap beers for Circle the Wagons. Obviously, the 2017 release from Button Shy Games, 2 players, 15 minutes. I'm going to start it out with Bauhaus Brew Labs from Minneapolis, Minnesota. They have Wagon Party. It's a California common, 5.4% ABV, 55 IBU. Now, this is an homage to the style of beer popular during the Gold Rush, fermented with lager yeast at higher ale temperatures, and a firm graininess with apricot, tangerine, and citrus hop notes. It's part of their core lineup, and it comes in a can.
Before I say what we have next, I do want to say this lines up with the 6 icons that are available in Circle the Wagons.
Good point.
Not the terrain types, because I'm not going to be like,
Desert.
water.
Desert beer.
No, this lines up with the 6 icons that you're going to find on your cards. Next up from BNS Brewing and Distilling Company in Santee, California, we have Revolver, which is a 6.5% ABV, 62 IBU American IPA. This won a 2015 gold medal at GABF, so even though they do have a revolving hop bill, it's probably bound to be a good one, and it's still getting high ratings.
All right, up next from D9 Brewing Company in Cornelius, North Carolina, actually the brewery that I think is physically closest to our current location, Brown Sugar Brown Cow. It's a brown ale, 6.9% ABV, 15 IBU. This is a mocha brown ale brewed with chocolate, vanilla, brown sugar, lactose, and Colombian coffee. Available year-round on draft and in cans, which is delicious. I do enjoy this beer, and it's physically close to us right now.
Yeah, it's funny. D9, when I think about D9, I think about sour beers because they are an amazing sour beer brewery, and they've always got a ton of them on. But Brown Sugar Brown Cow is just a really, really good, interesting beer that isn't really what you normally think of when you go to them, but they put it out all the time. They've just recently started canning it. It is a good beer to try. Next up from Brewery de Rank in Dotigny's Hainaut, Belgium, we have their 3X Bitter, which is a Belgian IPA, which is 6% ABV and 70 IBU. This is a variation on their Double X Bitter with 50% more hops.
Nice.
It is bottled, and if you're actually looking for a whole bunch of information on this beer, I really suggest watching Season 3, Episode 7 of the Brewdog show that was produced for a while. I think you can watch it on Amazon Prime Video, or a bunch of those streaming services have the series of those available. But they create an ultimate Belgian 6-pack, and this 3X Bitter is one of the ones that they put into that ultimate Belgian 6-pack, and they have a really nice in-depth talk with the guy who brews it, so that you can get a whole bunch of information and hear it right from the source. It is a very hoppy beer for the region, even coming in at 70 IBU. For the region, it is an incredibly hoppy and bittered beer. So this is one that I'm recommending specifically for the beer in the game, because the beer in the game comes in a green bottle and it has 3 X's on it to indicate it's alcohol.
There you go.
Well, that is like the green label of the 3X Bitter, and that obviously the 3 X's reminded me immediately of that. I was like, okay, this is the one that we're doing for the beer.
Nice. That's a really good pairing. All right, number 5 from Silver Gulch Brewing Company in Fox, Alaska, we have Pickaxe Porter. It's a porter, unsurprisingly, 4.8% ABV and 25 IBU. This is a moderately sweet porter brewed with Cascade hops. It's available year-round on bottles and on draft.
And finally, we have a beer I honestly cannot believe we haven't used in a 6-pack yet, but I do not believe we have. From Dogfish Head Craft Brewery in Milton, Delaware, we have Fort, which is a fruit beer. It is 18% ABV and 49 IBU. It's a strong ale brewed with pureed raspberries. Now, this is one of their infrequent releases. They don't brew it every year. And it doesn't look like they're brewing regular Fort this year, but on 6/22 they released Fruitful Fort, which should be available on draft and in bottles from July through September of this year, according to their release calendar, because Dogfish Head puts out a really nice release calendar that has the time length for all of their specialty releases.
Nice.
This is Fort, but with blackberries, boysenberries, and elderberries joining the raspberries.
Dang.
They also reworked the malt bill a little bit, but cool, whatever. I mean, like, the berries are the headline here.
Huh.
Fort is definitely one of those beers that is absolutely amazing and is something to be sipped and enjoyed like a wine. Obviously, at 18%, you better sip and enjoy it like a wine or it's going to put you on your butt.
Yeah, that is not a typo.
But it is just, it's a very, very good beer. It is the beer that we used to celebrate when we moved into our house. It's that kind of beer. You save it for a special occasion and it's just really amazing. They have started putting Fort in 12-ounce bottles in the past couple of years. It used to be their big 750 bottle release, but they've started putting it in smaller 4-packs. So if you're able to get a 4-pack of this, you have 4 very special occasions that you can save this beer to share with somebody or a couple of somebodies that you just want to have a celebration with. It's very good. There are forts in Circle the Wagons, which is why we're talking about this. But if you can get this full-fruited Fort, go do it. It will be very much worth your time.
Yeah, we might have to put in a call for that one.
I think I know a guy.
Yes. Oh, that's really exciting. That's cool. They've been doing kind of spin-offs of their super high gravity. Dogfish Head has this line of the warning label caps that are the bright green kind of warning sign, the 120-minute IPA, the Worldwide Stout, and Fort, which were all, and Raison d'Extra, which are all the ones that are 15% and plus. But they had the oak-aged vanilla Worldwide Stout, and so it sounds like...
Which is very good.
Yeah, it sounds like they're coming out with some more variants of their huge beers. I kind of wonder if they're going to do something to 120 now. Ooh. Well, we will look out for that in the future, and if it happens, we will definitely be reporting it to you. But if you want more information on any and all of those beers, the show notes section, draftmechanic.net, click the button, and you will find the infos. So, Danielle, here's an interesting headline. No CO2, yes problem?
Yeah, when I was looking up things that were going on in the beer news lately, because we've been talking about a bunch of different styles in the recent episodes, I've done a couple of beer primers in a row, I was like, okay, let me just check to see if there's any news going on that I want to talk about. And the thing that kept popping up was that there is a CO2 shortage in Britain, and that it is impacting, along with a lot of other food and beverage industries. It's impacting Coca-Cola's processing, it's impacting the meatpacking industry for a couple of reasons, but it is also impacting the beer industry. And my first thought when I was looking at this was, well, beer is carbonated when it ferments. Why is the CO2 shortage such a huge problem? And then I actually thought about it, and I looked into it, and I was like, oh, there's a bunch of reasons. CO2 is one of those things that we often look over when we're talking about, you know, the different things that go into beer. Obviously, you talk about your malt and your hops and your yeast and your whole brewing process, but the usage of prepared CO2 is something that's really vital to not only breweries, but to pubs and bars in general. A couple of different reasons. It is used at all levels of the production and the sales process because brewers will use CO2 to move beer around their production facilities without introducing oxygen, because oxygen is going to lead to all kinds of off flavors and possible contamination. So they use CO2 to move the beer around to actually get it brewed and fermented and all of that. You also use CO2 to purge bottles of oxygen because, as I said, oxygen, not great for beer. You're going to use the CO2 to purge bottles before you're fill and capping them. So any kind of production facility is going to have a problem if they don't have CO2 that they're able to bottle with. Any beer that's force carbonated is also going to require CO2 because that's what you force carbonate it with. You put CO2 in like you would with a soda. You'd introduce that so it's more fizzy, especially if you've got something that's been lagered for a long time, or if you've got a beer that you want a certain level of carbonation. If you don't have CO2 canisters, you can't force carbonate anything. So say that the brewery manages to make a cask ale, they don't bottle it, it gets put into a keg, they send it out to the bar. Well, you still need CO2 once you get to the bar or pub, because any standard tap system is going to be propelled by either CO2 or a mix of CO2 and nitrogen. It's forced into the keg, and that's what pushes the beer out, so when you pull that little handle, you get beer in the glass, and it also creates the frothiness in that glass at that moment. Because, obviously something that's carbonated isn't always going to have a giant, nice big head on it like a beer often would. So if you don't have any CO2, you can't run a standard tap system. All you can do is a cask ale or something with a hand pump, which there is actually more hand pumps in pubs in England than there are in the US, certainly. But the majority of those systems are still going to be standard tap systems that need CO2 to run. What this is causing is at least one of the major distributors has put a limit on orders to prevent stockpiling, because some of these breweries are just not able to send any more of their product out to be sold to different places. And this is supposed to be cleared up by this weekend, but the timing is phenomenally bad, which is part of what also made this a news story. Right now, in case you were living under a rock, the World Cup is going on. And England is still in the World Cup, and they've been having, for England, phenomenally nice weather. So they had expected to pull 46 million extra pints during the first round of the World Cup, and if England made it to the final 16 teams, they expect to pour another 10 million extra pints.
Oh, wow.
So this CO2 shortage, even though it should resolve hopefully in the next little while, has really put a damper on the entire beer and pub industry in Britain, and I would imagine in a lot of other places that are just not having it being reported in all of the major U.S. news sources. I didn't mention why this had occurred, because I had said there's a CO2 shortage, but obviously CO2 happens all around, and you'd think that we'd be able to do it. The thing that has happened is that a bunch of the major producers of these CO2 canisters and containments have gone down for maintenance at the same time.
That is not good.
No,
Not good timing.
it was just poor planning. They went down for maintenance at the same time during a hot time of the year, during the World Cup, which is just, the timing is really weird. Hopefully at least one of them should be coming back online after this weekend, so the problem should resolve itself, but it was the kind of thing that you don't even really think about when you think about problems that can impact the beer industry, and I wanted to talk about it because it's just one of those one-off things that we're probably not going to see being an issue frequently, but you have to keep everything in mind when you're talking about something. Even in a craft beer industry, which we think of as a small industry, there are so many different tie-ins to what you need to do, and this was something that I thought was really interesting to look at.
Yeah, that's a fun story. Obviously not fun for the businesses, but fun to talk about.
I will say, if you have 3 or 4 minutes to spare, there is a video on CNN where they're interviewing the head of the British Beer, and I think it's Beer and Alcohol Commission or something, this lovely lady, and she is just a ray of sunshine in the face of just absolute garbage timing. Her comment on it was, well, we still want you to go out to the pubs and watch the game. We think it's really important, support the teams, go out, have a pint, and if your favorite beer isn't on, well, that's just an opportunity to try something new. And I was like, that lady knows how to spin gold.
There you go.
So if you want to search for the CNN interview with the head of the UK Beer, and I believe it's the Beer and Alcohol Commission, but you should be able to find it. It's about a 3-minute video. It's worth watching.
That is great. Well, that is a fun and interesting beer segment. Thank you very much for putting that together. I believe it is time for us to go into our feature segment where we talk about our 2017 a second time.
But I have a feeling first we have a word from a certain Viking leader.
All right. Time for a little sponsor break, and we'll be right back. As a Viking leader, I'm used to coming into contact with strange new civilizations, usually right before I raid and pillage the heck out of them, and I'm all about collecting the right tools to overpower and control my adversaries. I like an axe.
Well, that's not exactly what's going on here, Gunnar. In Multi-Universum, you are a member of a team of scientists that was trying to create a time machine, but accidentally opened dozens of portals to new dimensions. That would be all well and good, but there are monsters coming through from the other sides, and you need to close as many portals as you can and fast.
Like I said, lady, strange new civilizations, axe to the head.
I suppose. Multi-Universum uses a system where, depending on which of your machine's transmitters you're standing at, your cards will provide a different combination of basic actions. In addition, each transmitter has a different open portal, so tools that are perfect for Portal 3 may not work at Portal 5.
Spears worked better when I invaded the Faroe Islands.
Every time you close a portal, you get a glimpse into another world, so as a scientist, you'll get rewarded for getting a look at a diverse set of worlds, or several looks into a specific world. And don't forget, these resources aren't free, so efficiency is important too. Check out Multi-Universum at greyfoxgames.com or at your game store of choice.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. So this main segment's obviously going to be a little more free-form than our usual six-pack review or even a six list or a variance or something like that, because we are going to take a look at how our tastes of our 2017 games have changed now that we are at the end of the first half of 2018. We've had a chance to play some more games. They came out in 2017, and also had a chance to distance ourselves from the games in 2017 so we can talk about how they stuck around or how they've changed. And I actually, this time, I have last year's list in front of me, and I have this year's list in front of me as well.
Okay, I've got my tops. We did a six-pack for each of us. So I've got my six-pack from the beginning of this year, so right at the end of last year. And I've got my one that I did just in the last week or two. So I will be able to do that. I also want to go really quickly through the categories that we talked about.
Yeah.
If neither of us is going to change anything in them, we'll just say that we left them the same. But there are a couple of things that I'd either like to adjust or certainly to add to talk about some new games that are at least contestants in those categories that I would have mentioned as a sort of an honorable mention, which is something we did when we were doing these categories as well.
Okay.
First off, we have best artwork. I had Near and Far. You had Flip Ships. I do want to add honestly, it might be a contestant for the best artwork in my opinion, but I know it is very specific to my taste because I very much like the artist who did the artwork in Pot de Vin, which we talked about, I think, an episode or two ago.
Yeah.
It's a trick-taking card game where you're managing two different sets of suits. You've got the suits that you're using to win tricks and the suits that you're using to get points, and they are spread out throughout in a different sort of... You don't always have the same being paired with the same sets of suits. So it is a neat trick-taking card game, but the art is done by Weberson Santiago, who, if you've played Bloody Inn, you might be very familiar with his style. It is a little bit absurdist. It is very cool to look at. He uses a lot of really bright colors and interesting, portrayals of people, particularly. I absolutely love his art. He was part of the most recent series that BGG did where they had different game artwork designed by artists who were not the artists for those games. I absolutely love the work he does, and Pot de Vin is no exception. I know when we talked about this, I gushed about the artwork as well, and I would say, for me, personally, that was one of the art in games that I was just so excited to see. I bought this game because he did the artwork for it, not knowing anything about it. It was $15. I was like, okay, I need to have his artwork in this game. So I really wanted to give a shout out to that.
Yeah. I'm going to keep Flip Ships with my art of the year, but I also want to throw a nod at Charterstone from Stonemaier Games. I really appreciate the art in that game. It's so light and so just kind of pleasant to look at. And we constantly, as we're playing through Charterstone right now, we're flipping up cards and we're looking at these characters, and every single character is just an interesting, fun thing to see. Yeah,
I agree with you. It is. It's certainly a fun game to look at.
Components, best non-miniatures components. I had Dice Forge. What did you have?
Photosynthesis.
Yeah.
I don't see a need to change that. It is a very functional component, despite me not really liking the game. The way they did the trees in that game is very well done, and they were very pretty to look at as well.
Yeah, I'll keep on with Dice Forge as well. The constructing dice is just fantastic.
Biggest disappointment, I had Photosynthesis to follow up on that statement I just made, and you had Yamatai.
Keeping it there.
Okay.
Game you wish you'd played more from 2017. I had Dojo-kun, which I never played, and so I kind of feel like it shouldn't be there anymore. If anything, I kind of want to echo what you have for your game you wish you had played more, which is The Seventh Continent. And I'm sure we'll come back to talking about this in a little bit. Danielle, do you still feel the way about that for being a game you wish you had played more of?
I do. I feel like if I had we were very excited about this game when we got it, and I'm still very excited to play it. Unfortunately, because it is such a long play cycle, it doesn't hit the table as much for us as I would like it to. I mean, that's not to say it's a bad game or I don't want to play it. It requires a certain type of evening that we both have free, and that the cat is being a behaved little dude, because if you get somebody jumping up on that table and messing up all your cards, your map is gone. I would love to have played it more, hoping that maybe we would have gotten into the habit of doing it at a certain, maybe one weekend a month we do a Seventh Continent weekend or something like that. I wish we had gotten into more of a habit so that we got it to the table more. Okay. So I'm excited about it. I want to know what happens more in that story.
Mm-hmm. At this point, it might be a reset and start over, which is terrifying.
No, we're not doing that.
Okay, we're not doing that.
We'll talk about this later.
All right, party game. I'm keeping Vegas Wits and Wagers as my favorite party game of last year.
I also picked Vegas Wits and Wagers, and I do still absolutely love that game. It's not very available, and there was another party game that I wanted to sort of call out as either an honorable mention or another option for the best party game that came out last year, because it fills a specific section of our game library that I really wanted, which is something that feels like the snarkiness of Cards Against Humanity without any of the overt racism, or other discriminatory language, which is something that I really, really wanted. The game is Pitch Deck, and it is the same sort of style of game as your Cards Against Humanity or your Apples to Apples. One person who is the judge for the round is going to flip up a company, and then everybody is going to take a group of people or a target audience from their hand and say what that company for this group of people would be, and pitch that company to an investor. And then at the end, there'll be one winner, and people are going to invest in that company. It allows you to use your same sort of, this is kind of wacky off the wall, how would this fit into that? But it doesn't make everybody feel bad. Mm-hmm. And I really like that about this.
Yeah, I think that the really good power of Pitch Deck is that if you're playing a game of Pitch Deck and somebody is constantly making it uncomfortable, you know it's that person rather than the game forcing them to be that way.
Yeah, you can't blame the game.
Yeah, and then you can just remove that person from your group, because don't be that guy. Please don't be that person.
Yeah, there's always something in your hand. You have enough cards in your hand. You can always make a good joke without making an off-color joke. Mm-hmm. So do that. Yeah. Also, the art on this is fun. It's cartoony, and it is just really bright colors. The graphic design draws you in. I like it. I think it is a fun game, and I think that if we could get bars to put Pitch Deck and get rid of a couple of copies of Cards Against Humanity, we'd be in a better gaming social scene.
Yes, except for the scoring mechanism, which is kind of wonky.
The scoring mechanism is weird, but nobody ever
score.
uses the scoring mechanism in those games.
No, everybody wins if you don't keep score.
Okay.
Ooh, I just made a new exciting thing for life. Everyone wins if you don't keep score.
And you get a participation ribbon, and you get a participation ribbon.
Touche. All right, card game of the year, Matryoshka. I am not changing that, and I doubt that will change for me, no matter how many games from 2017 I play. Danielle?
You're all about that game.
Moving on. Talk about it, Danielle.
I had picked Herbaceous, which is still an absolutely great game. I haven't soured on Herbaceous, but my favorite card game of last year actually turned out to be Illimat, which is a game we talked about briefly that the Decemberists had done with Keith Baker, and it was a game that came from a prop that they had from a photo shoot for one of their tours, where they wanted to create a game that people could play as like a society, sort of like a league that people played this game, and it had all this mysticism about it, and it turned out to be a really, really good game. Mm-hmm. I enjoy playing this game. I know it's the kind of thing that if you have 4 players and you want to sit down and just play a card game for the night, this is the kind of game that really works well to do that. Like, you could play a couple of hands of this, and it would take you most of the evening, and you would have a great time doing it. I really enjoy this. Again, a beautiful game. You will sort of see that in my list.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy it. You can find it in actually a bunch of weird places. It's in game stores, but it's also in sort of like
craft stores
or like
places,
what I call tchotchke shops, which is, where you go to Christmas for the person you don't know what to buy for.
Stores populated by people who listen to the Decemberists.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Stuff like that. But it's a great game. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Final category was most innovative. I had Magic Maze, and I really can't see anything else taking that away for me, because there wasn't a whole lot of crazy innovation in 2017. There was just a bunch of really good games. So I'm gonna leave it there because I'm comfortable with that.
I'm going to stick with Seventh Continent, which
Yeah.
I had that whole sort of story, map building, giant box of cards. I enjoy that as an innovation. I think it worked really well.
Cool. So let's get into the top games of the list. Now, this year, I went on the board game ranking engine on pubmeeple.com, and
As
I
did I.
actually, as we were preparing for the podcast today, I was digging down in the stack of papers where all of the show notes go to die, and I found my printout from 6 months ago. So I actually have last 6 months ago's listing of my top games of 2017. So
We really need to put a recycling bin
probably
up
should do
here.
that. Get a shredder of some kind. We don't need to shred that. Nobody needs to. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, my top 6 were Flip Ships, Downforce, Matryoshka, Sagrada, Near and Far, and number 1 was Seventh Continent.
My top 6 were, I also had Seventh Continent, Near and Far, and Sagrada. I also had Azul, 5 Minute Dungeon, and Seikatsu.
So I was really surprised, as we were preparing for the episode here, to take these two lists side by side, and I didn't look at my old list when I made my new list at all, but to put them side by side and then just do the math on it and see what went up and what went down. Because obviously, if you look at the top of the list, so there were some big changes. Some stuff fell out of my top 6 that are surprised me that they fell so low, and some things rose into the top 6 and got in my top 10 that I am kind of surprised. So overall, in my top 10 that I've done on this most recent list, 2 of them were new. So that's cool. 2 games that I played in the last 6 months from last year entered into my top 10. That was Charterstone and Agra. Did you have anything new pop into the top of your list?
Oh, yeah, I have actually a couple of things which are new on the top of my list.
Okay.
Well, I didn't have the top 10 from, I had the top 6, but in my top 6, I've got 2 things that weren't on the top 6 list, and I also have Charterstone and Aggro, which I know we've played in my top 10, which I know we've played since the beginning of the year. I also have Altiplano at 10, which we've just played recently, so that would be something that we had not even considered in that list. Actually, depending on where you consider it having come out, like the game came out in 2017, but not in America.
Yeah.
It got a decent distribution at Essen last year, so I'm considering it a 2017 game.
Okay.
Either way, it's a 10. It's not on my top 6. But yeah, there are a couple of newer things. But then again, you're going to see when we go through a top 6 again, there is some consistency in my list as well.
So how do you feel about going from our 10 and going up to 1? Because I feel like that'll be an interesting conversation.
Okay, my number 10, which I think I actually just said was my number 10, is Altiplano, which is a game that we talked about a couple episodes ago. I've really enjoyed this game. I enjoyed the artwork. I enjoyed the gameplay. It made me like a style of game that I had previously not liked when it was implemented by Orleans. And not only do I like it, but I like the fact that it is routinely being brought out again in our game group. So I know that the folks we play games with are going to enjoy this game as well. So not only is it a great game for me, I enjoy it personally, but I know I can ask people to play it, and they're not going to be playing it because I'm like, oh, we need to play this new game.
Yeah, it's come out a number of times without us even being part of the game, just
Yeah, I'm
because...
kind of bummed about that.
Well, you too can play with the alpaca as you choose. All right, my number 10 this round is Vegas Wits and Wagers, which is up from number 18 when I did my list last year. It's kind of cool to have that handy. And I was surprised to see this one raise this much, but I think that I'm just excited about playing the next game of Vegas Wits and Wagers. It doesn't come up very often, but it's so much fun to play in a big scene. And when we have con season coming up, and we've got the Great Big Board Game Day coming up in August that we're hosting, we got Mega MooseCon coming up later in August, I've got a whole lot of opportunities to get this out, and I'm really excited to do that. I'm not just being like, oh man, well I guess we're going to play Vegas Wits and Wagers again. It's like, oh man, we get to play Vegas Wits and Wagers again. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy the experience and the group camaraderie that comes out of playing this game at a big event. Okay, so my number 9 on this list is Downforce, and this one is down 4 spots from number 5, and it's still up there well enough, and this is still a game that I enjoy bringing out, and I could honestly see this rising back up again after Gen Con when the, I think it's Danger Alley expansion comes out, because it'll give me a reason to bring it out more. I think one of the things that's kind of made me play it less is that I kind of gotten a little tired of the way that the scoring works. I don't really feel like the scoring does a whole lot. The playing of the game is where the fun is, and I don't know. I just like... I don't feel like I have a whole lot of control over the score and who's winning in the game. But I enjoy the stories that come out of it and the yelling at each other, getting out of the way kind of stuff. That's been fun.
See, I like Downforce for the opposite reason. I love the scoring because even if I don't win the race, I can still win because I did smart betting.
Okay.
And I think that, and because I bought my car at a cheaper price and didn't overbid for it. That's the part I like about it. I'm not usually a race game fan, whereas you tend to like a race game. So I like the scoring on that. Downforce is on my list at like 20 or 21.
Okay.
21.
Yeah.
My number 9 is Seikatsu, which had previously been in my top 6. And the reason why this has fallen a little bit for me is not because the game is terribly bad. It's not. I love the game. But it is very much best at 3 players.
Yes.
If you have 4 players, you can play it, but the rules get a little wonky. If you have more than 4 players, you can't play it. If you have 2 players, you can play it, but it's like playing 2/3 of a game.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-player game, and I so rarely have a group that is 3 players that can sit down and play that game that it has sort of fallen a little bit just because I don't get it to the table as much as I would like to. It is great when you can, but to sit there and be like, oh, sorry, we're going to play this game, when you could just grab a 4-player game and then everybody would be included, is a little bit of an issue for me, especially since we host.
Cool.
My number 8 is Aggro, which was our first heavyweight review that we did the first quarter of this year. And it was obviously a game from 2017. We didn't do a heavyweight first quarter review of a 2018 game. And I really enjoyed it. I liked that game. I liked making all the gears turn in the ways that they needed to turn to make everything work. I liked the way you had to manage your resources in just the right way. This is a big game, and it is, you commit your evening to play it. But when you do, I really got a good reward out of that, and I just love playing it.
Cool. My number 8 is Coldwater Crown, that moved 3 spots up from a number 11 on the last time I did the list. And I'm not too surprised because this is, again, it's a game from last year that's continuing to come out. And I'm finding a lot of games that, I think Coldwater Crown was kind of early in the year, and it kind of got bowled over by some new hotness during the middle of the year in Gen Con season. But it survived that wave, and it's continuing to come out again and again. And obviously, we just played the Sea expansion recently, and it's encouraged us to bring it back again. But I love the way that the worker placement in this game works. It feels like casting. You're placing a worker, you're retrieving a worker. And that one mechanic ties the entire game together thematically. And it's so cool the way that it feels when you play this game. And I just love the fact that, like, this wasn't... Brian Surrey didn't set out to make a fishing game when he made this game. He had the mechanic, and he's, like, playing with people, and they're like, wow, this feels like casting. He's like, oh, yeah, okay.
Fishing.
Brian comes up with some really cool mechanics. Obviously, we love his earlier game Paradox a whole lot from 2015 or 2016. But to see Coldwater Crown have a similar exciting hook as
You made a fish pun.
It's keeping it in my mind and making me want to bring it out again.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that this might not have gotten as much buzz as you would have expected it to is because Raiders of the North Sea, which has a similar mechanic, had an expansion that came out last year. So that got a little bit of the hype. It had to split the hype between those games. Hopefully, with the Sea coming out this year, it'll get that reinvigoration that an expansion does for a good game, and we'll see more people bringing this to the table.
More people get on the boat? Huh? Yeah? No? No.
Yeah, this is good. It's good pun.
Okay. Anyway, my number 7 of 2017 is Charterstone. This is a new entry to the list. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. We're
Twins! Me too!
Oh, you're also 7 on this one? All right. So we have a nice little bit of overlap here at the number 7. I enjoy Jamie Stegmeier's designs, and Charterstone has not been an unbalanced mess, which is what I have heard from some other people that have played it. And I'm wondering what game they played and what decisions they made, because we're having a pretty fun time with this thing.
They played Seafall.
Oh, okay, true. But Charterstone is not going to be a crazy heavy legacy game in terms of like big, giant, massive stories like thematic, theatrical, pandemic legacy stuff. It's a worker placement game that evolves and it plays quickly. I don't think this game has ever really overstayed its promised 1 hour time. I'm pretty sure every game has been about that, and it's, we've played the game, we've had some progress, and it doesn't take forever to freaking learn how to play every time you bring it out. Seafall, I'm looking at you again.
That's what I was going to say. Like, we sit down to play this, and even, not the last time we played, but the time before it, our group got busy, and it was I want to say almost 2 months between the session before and that session. And we looked at it. We did a little bit of perusing of the rule book to make sure we had a couple of specific rules right. And then we were able to go and we were able to play the game. And it was a good time. We weren't sitting there and trying to figure out what this was because we don't want to screw it up when we change something. I will also say, you said it doesn't have a ton of story, but it does have some story.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil anything, but at the end of our last game, we just got a very interesting story twist that also affects the mechanics of the game. But something happened, and I'm like,
I forgot about that. Oh, yeah.
well,
okay.
I'm sure you did.
Yes.
But it was an interesting thing that I wasn't expecting, and it created that intrigue that we've seen in other sort of legacy we get from the Near and Far campaign that we played. And I'm sure we'll talk about Near and Far more later. Sorry
Perhaps.
to spoil things for people. But
it's not really a spoiler that one of our top games is still on the list.
I know. But it creates those touchstone points of memorable experiences that I really want from a legacy game. I want to look back at it and say, oh, remember when we found this card and it was the first thing to come out and we were all like, wow, that's crazy. And that is what makes the game exciting for me. Plus, it plays really well, and it's simple to play, and it makes sense, and it's a good, fun game, and the art is pretty, and yay, Charterstone.
Cool.
Good times.
All right, your number 6 is...
My number 6 is Illimat.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
There
if
you
it's
go.
my favorite card game, you'd expect it to be on this list. For all the reasons I said before when I was talking about why it's a great card game, I enjoy the feeling of playing it. I enjoy the atmosphere. I enjoy the way it looks. I think it's an interesting game that is just complex enough to make it feel like you have a meaty card game, but not so complex that it's just stupid and you spend the whole game trying to figure out what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
This type of card game, like Hearts or Spades or any sort of trick-taking game that you'd sit down and play around a table as a social experience, I feel like needs to be easy enough that once you know what you're doing, you can play the game and just go. And once you do that, once you learn Illimat, you can certainly do that. But it is a little bit more complex than something like Hearts. There are a few more rules, which fulfills the gamer side of me.
Cool. All right, my number 6 is going to kind of telegraph the rest of my list, I think. Because my number 6 game from 2017...
Carcassonne.
Is no. My number 6 game from 2017 is now The Seventh Continent.
Okay.
This is, I mean, kind of a bombshell to me after I did this list that it came out at number 6 because this was my number 1 game of the year last year. And I think we kind of skirted around it when we were talking about a game we wish we played more of earlier on. And I wish I had played more of this game, but I think that this game dropped a good number of spaces on my list primarily because it's daunting to get it to the table for me. And for a game that plays solo or 2 players or 3 or 4, but we're really never going to play it with more than 2, it's kind of daunting to get it to the table sometimes. And especially if we're in the middle of one of these 14, 15, 20-hour game sessions and which is time slips away from us, it's hard to get it out and just be like, I don't remember where we've been here. We forgot we were on this island. And in a way, when we did our review of it, it was very clear to say this is my 7th Continent Review Part 1, because obviously there's a wealth of information and content in that box. There's 2 complete other curses, and we've got the expansion on the way probably early of next year. So I'm still looking forward to doing a Part 2 review of this later on. But first, I got to get it back to the table. So for now, it's number 6, and I don't know if it's going to go back up again.
Okay.
Cool. My number 5 is the highest new entry on my list, and it is a game called Agra. You just talked about this one briefly.
I did.
It is our first high-gravity review of the year, like we talked about, and I just loved the crunchiness of the resource production in this game.
Don't eat them.
Okay. Well, the mechanical crunchiness of the resource production in this game. It was one of those games that, as we got further into the review cycles and review plays for that game, I found myself thinking about the game in a fundamentally different way, and I started unlocking parts of it in my brain that I didn't really ever see, and that was such a rewarding experience with that game. We've seen it in some other heavy games. You know, obviously we talked about Vin Yosef, was that last 2 episodes ago, or the last episode? But a similar kind of thing, but the depth of Agra and the depth of new ideas that I had, and I was able to use more side actions efficiently, felt so good. And it's the kind of game that It is a limited play group. I will probably only play with you and Daniel and maybe one other person every now and then because, we've played it before and I don't want to get the learning curve. And also I want to play against people who have had that level up in brain thinking as well. But Agra has been a really rewarding and satisfying play each time we've brought it to the table. So I am really excited to have that reaching into the top 5 for me.
Okay, my new number 5 is Harvest Dice, which is a roll and write game.
Oh, okay.
I guess we put a disclaimer in here that we received a copy of Harvest Dice as a review copy from our sponsor, Grey Fox Games. Mm-hmm. That's not why it's here. It's here because it's a really interesting game for me. I like the fact that you have to make a choice between what you take and what you leave to acquire points at the end of the game. I like the spatial aspect of planning your garden so that you can plant things later on. I like the choice between making points for the pig to unlock special abilities or placing things into your garden. I like the little pig meeple. Mm-hmm. It's a very good meeple. It's just a really fun roll and write. It has a little bit more theme than something like Quicks, which was a roll and write I would have gone to previously. And it's really just a great game. So that's my number 5, Harvest Dice. My number 4 appeared on my list previously, and you're going to hear that a lot from me from here on out. My number 4 is Azul. This is a great game from Plan B Games where you are placing tiles. You're taking tiles from different coasters to fulfill the quota for each row that you're placing them in, and then you're moving them over to your tile wall. It's an absolutely great game. It's great for families because once you know how to do it, it's an easy teach. There is a beginner side. There is a more advanced spatial planning side that you can play with. It works for so many people. I really enjoy it. It has a nice tactile nature to it. Now that they have that first player token that's actually a tile, my qualms about any kind of component issues are pretty much gone. It's a fun game. It's great. I would suggest playing it.
Yeah. My 4 is also Azul, up 8 spots from number 12. And this is interesting because I had this one pretty low on my list relatively last year, especially for this is my biggest rise in my top list here. And it really comes down to the fact that this is a game that had a lot of hype, that then we played it and it continued to get better, which is weird for a game that's hyped. Usually you play it a whole bunch of times and it kind of slowly settles out. Obviously, Seventh Continent was one of those for me. But Azul is the kind of game that continues to get a little bit better every time I play it. And I feel like it's the kind of game I'm going to continue to use for years to get people to try something new. And people who aren't really into gaming but want to do a thing, they might play this game because it looks really pretty and it's easy to teach, except for, figuring out how the scoring thing works, which takes a little time for some people to get used to.
I don't understand why people have so much trouble with the scoring in that game.
But it is, it's the kind of thing that once people get the hang of it, it's quick and it's easy and it's fun. And when you get really good at it and you start playing 2-player and you start using the backside of the board, it becomes really, really mean in a really fun, rewarding way. Mm-hmm. So it's a game that has a wide range of use and continues to get a little bit better each time I play it. Cool. So my number 3 is Matryoshka.
Of course it is.
Well, I mean, everything from here on out is stuff that was at the top of my list before, but Matryoshka is my favorite card game, and it's going to continue to rise because I just freaking love the way that the trading feels in this game, and I don't care if I ever win this game ever again because I just have such a fun time bringing this out and sitting around and trading and sliding cards to each other and trying to see if I'm going to get lucky and get that card that I need. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this definitely has a unique trading mechanic where you are laying out a certain display of cards to try and hint to the other players what you need, and then everybody is making a trade whether they want to or not for cards that are given to them by other players. So it's very different from a lot of trading games. I enjoy it. I think this also is one of those entrants into the idea that sometimes you have to look at a theme and be like, that may not immediately appeal to me, but there could be an amazing game in there. If I had said to you, oh, I got this game about Russian nesting dolls, do you want to play it? You probably wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, I definitely need to play that. But now you've played it and you're like, oh, this is an amazing game and I want to play it all the time. Mm-hmm. So people who look down on games perhaps like Rococo maybe want to take advantage of themes that may not immediately be in their wheelhouse.
Uh-huh. All right, so what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Seventh Continent. It has fallen a little bit for me as well. I think it was my 1 or 2 in the 6-pack that we did. I think I said Near and Far and this were tied. So this has fallen a little bit, and I'm mostly keeping it up there because I don't have any evidence to bring it down. Like I said, I would love to have gotten into a routine to play this, but I do really have fond memories of being very excited when we did get it to the table. I am keeping it up there because of how much I want to play it again and how much I want to continue that story. I really love the way the mechanics work, how you've got that giant box of cards and you're just discovering things at every turn, creating the map. It's still amazing to me. It's just amazing that we don't get to dive into very often.
All right. Well, I think we're both tied on the last two. So number 2.
Sagrada?
Yep. Sagrada for me as well. Just love it. I mean, dice drafting is great. This game is freaking gorgeous. It's got some of the best dice and some of the best player boards in gaming in the last few years. And it is fun. It's quick and easy to teach. It constantly comes out at game night because it is such a quick and easy play. And it's just rewarding. It's a fun game that feels good to play, which I feel like I continue to say in some of these kind of abstract-y games, like Azul.
And very soon you're going to be able to play it with 5 or 6 players.
Yeah, I'm very excited
to see that. Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and they're bringing some more mechanics to it as well with that. Hopefully it doesn't bog it down too much, and I wouldn't be surprised if we just don't play with 5 and 6 a lot, because that would take a long time.
Or just play with 5 and 6 with the 4-player rules.
There you go.
And our number 1, I believe, for both of us is Near and Far, correct?
Yep, yes it is.
This is an excellent campaign game. It has beautiful artwork. The way the story is interwoven to the mechanics is better than, I believe we both think, and tell me if I'm wrong, better than was done in Above and Below, which was the previous storytelling game from Ryan Lockett.
Yeah.
It has drawn us back in. We are almost done with our campaign that we are running. And the only reason I'm pretty convinced we're not done with our campaign is because the person who's in our Near and Far campaign is also in our Charterstone campaign. So it just depends on whether that 4th person is available or not, whether we're doing Charterstone or Near and Far. It is just a great fun game. It creates those memories like I was talking about before. We have an evil robot. And that colors every discussion we have about that game, even when we're not playing it, even when we're just talking about it. It is just a phenomenal game.
Yeah, I have just really enjoyed the consistency in the storytelling. Like we talked about with Above and Below. Above and Below had a storybook, and it felt, you can go back and listen to their Near and Far review from last year about this, but it felt like Near and Far is what Ryan Lockett wanted Above and Below to be, because Near and Far has consistent developing storyline as you continue to play through the 10 or 12 games that you play in your campaign, and you learn more about your characters. Your characters develop. They don't develop like crazy amounts, but they develop enough for it to be interesting, and you feel like you're getting something out of each successive play of the game. We just got the Amber Mines expansion in the mail, which is
literally
awesome.
This week we just got it.
The other thing that I'm really excited about is that on the side of the box, it says it is expansion number 1. And it has more story in it, which means that maybe he's planning on just developing the story of Near and Far and continuing to put out more story content for this game, which is great because realistically, I don't want him to try Near and Far the 2, like
Nearer and Farther,
or like Inside and Outside or something like that. You know, I don't need another game that takes the step from Above and Below to Near and Far. I just want more Near and Far, and I want him to develop on that foundation. And I'm really excited because it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen. And maybe that encourages me and makes me more excited about Near and Far. But if so, that's a good thing.
I think that also falls in line with the fact that there were so many different ways to play Near and Far. While you had that big overarching campaign, you also had the character mode. And if he's going to be adding new characters in, there is an easy way to add more content without having to completely rework the campaign book or create another full campaign book. You could just add more character modules, essentially, to go with the expansion content. So I think that game is really set up to just blossom into more. And I'm all for it because Near and Far is good.
So yeah, that's our redone 2017 list as of the middle of 2018. I do have a few other notes that I thought were interesting from the way the stuff shook out on my list here. I had Queen Domino as my number 9, and it dropped down to 28. It's a good game, and I enjoyed playing it, but I'm more interested to play King Domino because of the quick and easiness of getting King Domino out. Also, they are obviously doing an expansion for King Domino in the near future. I'm excited to see what that does to that system. And realistically, Queen Domino had a lot to it, and I didn't really need that for that particular game, I guess.
So you've essentially come back to where I was standing on that one. I was like, I needed King Domino to be the simple game that it was to start with.
Yeah.
And I felt like Queen Domino added too much that I didn't need.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that either the expansion for King Domino is good and doesn't go quite as far, or you can just not play with it.
I also had Magic Maze drop from number 7 down to number 21. And I don't think this is...
Really?
Yeah, I don't think this is any particular reason other than I kind of got what I needed out of it. We have the expansion for it. We have maximum security, but it hasn't come out to the table yet. It's one of those games that I just need the right kind of time to play it, I guess. I got to have a group of... At this point, I want to have a group of people that have played it before, and we got to just set the ground rules of, hey, you know, let's have a good time with this. Let's not get mad. Nobody throw the pawn at anybody, and we'll be good. I had a few really high rises. New York Slice went from 37 up to 27. I just continue to enjoy that game. I love I Split You Choose. Herbaceous went up from 56 all the way up to 30, which was my biggest rise, and I think that's just because it continues to be a good, quick, and easy card game that I really enjoy. And the other high-rise one that didn't make it into the top 10 was Hot Shots, a cooperative dice rolling game, kind of a Yahtzee re-roll to match symbols mechanic. We've talked about it in the past.
You're a firefighter.
Yeah, it went from 23 up to 13, and that's really cool because Hot Shots is cool.
It is a very good game, and it has just awesome little fire minis.
The other one that I didn't talk about from my original top 6 is Flip Ships, which dropped down to number 12, and I think that's really just that we played it a whole ton, and it was super heavy on my mind, and it's probably still going to come out, but it's not coming out every day or every game night like it was for a while there.
Do you have a Dex game above it?
No, I do not. It
Okay,
is still
so
my
if you were
favorite
looking at a
dexterity game.
Dex game from last year, that's the one you're still going to point to.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I also have Kitchen Rush popped onto my list at number 14, which is exciting, and Pulsar 2849, which we've only played once. We played it at Geekway, but that broke into my top 20 on one play. So I'm interested to see what further plays of that do for Pulsar 2849. Maybe I will continue to enjoy it more.
I suspect that everybody might hear what we think of that game after more plays in a soon-to-be-released episode.
In a soon-episode. Soon-episode.
Soon-episode, yes.
Soon-episode, yes, that's the technical term. All right, that's enough of us rambling. I think it is time for us to take a quick break, and we are going to come back and find out what the Slack channel thinks about their favorite games of 2017.
This is a work of podcast. Any resemblance to actual games or actual beers is purely draftmechanic.net.
All right, it is time for the final round. In the final round, every episode, we talk to our Slack channel, where you can join up at draftmechanic.net/Slack and jump in. We ask a question and kind of get everybody's opinion, something to weigh in on for each episode. And this one, unsurprisingly, was about what we talked about in our big segment right there. I asked everybody, what was a 2017 game you played this year that rocked your world, and any particular reason that you missed it last year? So we have a wide range of answers here, and I will begin with Patrick Hillier from the What Did You Play This Week podcast. Well, it appears Istanbul Dice was published, probably in Europe, in 2017, but I just played it at Origins, and I loved it. And I grabbed it at my FLGS, so it really feels like a 2018 game. I recently picked up Meeple Circus. I seem to recall hearing about it at BGG Con last fall, but I didn't see it there. It's silly stacking fun with an accompanying soundtrack. Silly fun game I like to have in my collection. Lastly, I also picked up Clank in Space. I've been a regular old Clank fan, and I felt I didn't need this version until I heard the solo version was a campaign versus a solo in the base game, and a gift card made it cheap. The characters on the card also make the Trek fan in me laugh. I am very excited. I did not realize that the solo stuff for Clank in Space was a campaign, but we have Clank in Space. We got it off the trade table.
You just acquired Clank in Space.
And here I am, and I do like a fun little campaign mode, so we will probably see how that goes.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, Raja's the Ganges is my pick. Came out in 2017, but we didn't get it into our group until early this year. And every time it came to the table, I was playing something else. But last week, I finally got to try it, and I really enjoyed it. The learning curve is short, and I love the ability to mitigate luck. Plus, tons of tension in the back end creates some delicious decisions for the players.
Nice. I've not had a chance to play that game. I don't think I've seen anybody playing that game. But
no, me
it is
neither.
out there in the world. There's so many games. So many games in the world.
Talk about another one.
All right, Patrick, non-Hillier Patrick, the other Patrick in our Slack, says, for me, it's Bunny Kingdom. A friend picked it up at Essen, but we didn't get it to the table until February. Since then, it's been a near-constant presence at game days. The simple card drafting, area control mechanics make it accessible, with a wide variety of scoring options, giving it enough variability for the repeated plays. The bright colors and gorgeous art also help draw in players. Overall, a thumbs up. I mentioned in the Slack on the thread there that this is actually a game I picked up on my FBGL team last year and kept on reserve because it seemed like it got a lot of hype and then nobody talked about it and didn't really do anything in the stats, so it just remained on the bench. But
there you go.
Apparently it's a good game, and maybe I should get some bunnies.
That's a weird thing to say.
Maybe I should play Bunny Kingdom. There, saved it.
Here you go. Megan Naxer said, so far I haven't played any of the ones that have already been listed here. Oh wow, let me make a list. Azul, Noosefjord, Emperor's Choice, Indian Summer, Sagrada, Caverna Cave vs. Cave, Shadows in Kyoto, The Lost Expedition, Downforce, and Harvest are all 2017 titles that I played for the first time in 2018. I'm not always rushing out for the new hotness, so sometimes it takes a while to get newer titles to played. I'm not sure any of these games really rocked my world, but I've been really enjoying The Lost Expedition so far. It's a great weeknight game, the art is gorgeous, and according to my local game group, I apparently really like games that are all about trying to kill me.
That's funny. There's an expansion for Lost Expedition coming out soon, too, so potential more gameplay for you, Megan.
The Loster Expedition?
the Lost and then Found and then Re-Lost Expedition.
It's purgatory.
They made 6 seasons out of Lost. We can make another game of Lost Expedition. Anyway, Paul Imbeden from Split Second Games says, can't believe I'm that guy, but none. The past 12 months have been a return to the classics for me, for the most part, and Sidereal Confluence squeaked under the deadline in late December. That is a game that I really want to play, but I also don't know if I'm ever going to come across, because it seems like it will be a big undertaking to get a game of that played.
You're going to have to find somebody else to play it with, because that is a heavy negotiation game, and I am not interested.
All right.
Finally, from Bert Pike, we have, does Breath of the Wild count? I finally got around to buying a Nintendo Switch a couple of weeks ago. Wow, that game is amazing. Which, technically, no, it doesn't count, because this is about board games, but that game is amazing and gorgeous, and good for you getting a chance to play it.
Absolutely. I'm playing through Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. I picked it up for a Wii U before I got a Switch, and it is probably one of the best games I've ever played in my entire life.
Cool.
Ooh, I gotta go finish that.
You do.
I mean, it's so much fun to just run around aimlessly, and I promise I won't talk about video games.
No,
much.
but good for Bert enjoying this game, because it is certainly a great time. And we talk about really loving story points, and this game is full of story points. So
I'm really excited to have a Switch. There's so many good games coming out soon.
Focus.
I'm sorry, it's the end of the episode, and
is.
I'm thinking about playing video games now.
Well, let's finish the episode first.
All right. Well, if you would like to jump in on our Slack channel, draftmechanic.net/Slack is where you can go. There's always a final round topic right before we put an episode up.
I was going to say, if there's not one up right now, wait till just before the episode. There will be.
Yeah, you're usually putting it up a few days beforehand so it doesn't just sit there idle for 2 weeks. But yeah, jump in there, chat, and talk about games, talk about beer, talk about all that good stuff. And if you want to get in touch with us on the rest of the internet, at Draft Mechanic on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook are the places you go. Draftmechanic.net is the website. What is the other stuff we got?
We got Board Game Geek Guild number 2470, or you can send us an email. If you are in Charlotte, we have a local game night. Our next one is going to be on July 5th at Good Road Cider Works, so come out and play the games. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
It's a very nice prepared statement right there.
Now.
Let's not infringe on those Mile High Game guys.
No.
All right. Well, I think we've covered it all. Danielle, do you have anything else that you would like to say at the end of this episode?
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Sounds good. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Draft Mechanic episode 78 was recorded on Sunday, July 1st, 2018 in front of a live studio cat.
Beauty's in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hi, this is Eric Buscemi, popping in to let you know about a continuing interview series I've been doing on the Punchboard Media website called In Focus, Perspectives in Board Gaming. I've been interviewing people that work in all different facets of the board game industry, such as designers Nikki Valens and Daniel Salas, artists Fernandez Suarez and Beth Sobel, board game publishers Anne-Marie DeWitt and Shari Spiro, and many other people with unique industry perspectives. Check out our interviews on the Punchboard Media website, www.punchboardmedia.com, where a new one is posted every Wednesday afternoon.
Punchboard Media, where we all
Bring something
to the table.
pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.